Hello and welcome to What's My Tagline? I'm your host, Carol Flagg. Thanks for tuning in today. On this show, we put our microphone in front of a variety of industry experts to understand the factors influencing messaging, branding, and reputation in healthcare. You can follow the conversation on Twitter at #What'sMyTagline and follow me at Carol Flagg. My guest today is Will Reilly, the Vice President of Client and Consumer Marketing at VisitPay, a Boise-based company that develops patient financial engagement solutions. Will is joining me today to talk about applying healthcare marketing to the billing experience. Will, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure, Carol. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation, but fair warning, my first question to all my guests, if you had to describe yourself as a tagline, what would it be?
Yeah, so if I had to describe myself as a tagline, it would be one size doesn't fit all. And I was thinking about this, here I am, a Brit in Boise working in US healthcare technology, right? That's a sort of strange combination, not a likely combination. And I think it sort of says something a little bit about me. One size doesn't fit all. I've spent a lot of my career working in high technology marketing, working for big multinational organizations. And the reason I sort of got into healthcare was in my previous employment, they asked me to move to a really big city in the US, and I've been living in Idaho for quite a long time, loving it, absolutely loving it here, and I adore it in Idaho. And I just felt like this was time to make a change in my career and stay in Idaho and find a new course, chart a new course. I sort of didn't want to do what everyone else was doing, if you know what I mean. So
Sure.
One size doesn't fit all kind of sums up my approach to work, and it's also how I got into the healthcare industry.
And so, of course, we're going to start talking about this idea of healthcare marketing and billing, which is not something that I would think, or a lot of people certainly would think, go hand in hand. Usually, of course, billing and the idea of as a patient or a consumer of getting a bill is not necessarily a cause for great joy.
Exactly. Which is yeah. I mean, that's a tremendous understatement, right?
I got my bill.
Right. Precisely, and it's exactly because there are so many negative emotions and associations with billing that is the reason why marketers should care about it and should be getting actively involved in it, and it also comes back to my tagline, because my firm belief is that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to billing, and yet that is pretty much the experience that most of us get in US healthcare today.
Yeah, I think that's never more true today with high deductible health plans and whatnot.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So talk a little about that. Talk about using the billing process for marketing. Why health system marketing professionals need to invest in that particular avenue.
Yeah, because I think that so firstly, it is a source of pain and frustration for so many people, and I think we all know that. I think you don't need studies or whatever to tell you that. I think we all know it from our personal experience, that the minute a paper statement kind of comes in the mail, your heart sinks, right? And for me, I think the paper statement is the symbol of this sort of undifferentiated, fairly cold experience. And of course, what we've seen happen with, in particular, the rise of high deductible health plans, as you mentioned, that over the last few years, the balance is due on those paper statements. The balances that are responsibility of the patient has grown very, very significantly. So what was once just a few years ago, a sort of irritant to the consumer, I've got this bill and I don't really get it kind of thing, but hey, it's only for $50, so maybe it doesn't matter too much, has suddenly become a very different story, right? Because suddenly health systems are asking for a very large amount of money from individual consumers. And so for that reason, it's become a very, very important area to tackle. And there are all sorts of skills and smarts that you need to be able to do it well, consumer finance expertise and so on. But fundamentally, it is a great an important touch point in the overall patient experience, which is why I believe that marketers need to be getting actively involved in it now.
And so obviously you think of, I'm the patient, I get the bill, I get my explanation of benefits, also, like as you mentioned, also kind of a confusing situation usually as it happens these days. But there's an opportunity. So talk a little bit about what those opportunities look like. How does a health system include marketing in this process?
Yeah, so really, so the billing moment is an experience, right? And so the opportunity is to turn this experience from one that has negative associations to one that has maybe not positive associations because we're being asked to pay a bill, but one that at least has positive leaning associations, things like compassion, personalization, and so on. And that really requires marketing smarts and marketing skills, because what the marketer does naturally is think about people as individuals and think about how to tailor experiences so that they fit the needs and the situation of those individuals. And so the marketer will ask questions of the revenue cycle or the finance team in the healthcare organization just about how that health system is showing up to that person. Are they being given options that actually make sense for them as an individual? Are they being presented with information that is clear and comprehensible to them? Are we engaging with them through channels that the patient wants to engage with us through, right? So the marketer is able to begin asking those kinds of questions of the finance team. And what we often find is that the finance team and the revenue cycle team, through no fault of their own, don't necessarily think about the experience that way, because for such a long time, medical billing has been essentially a business-to-business transaction. It's been a business-to-business process between commercial or government payers and the health system. And so the whole sort of vocabulary and way of working around collecting payments has grown up on this very transactional coding, exchange of data kind of basis. And of course, that's not how individual people work, and it's not what individual people are looking for.
I think that's really interesting that you talk about what I would call this compassionate approach to billing, right?
We do quite a lot of social listening at VisitPay, where we sort of listen to the chatter around billing through different social channels, Twitter, Facebook in particular, and so on. It's actually very interesting how people use different social channels to express their experiences about something. Actually, on Twitter, people tend to be quite angry and write these short, infuriated expressions, and in Facebook, people tend to write, actually, sometimes people write enormously long posts on Facebook about their billing experience, which sort of shows, again, I suppose, the depth of the emotion. But what we tend to find is that people have actually a really positive clinical experience. So a really common theme to people's commentary around billing is something along the lines of, the nurses were great, but billing can't figure it out. I love my doctor, but the billing experience is this faceless, horrible, like uncompassionate thing. And so it actually becomes a really unfortunate sort of bookend to the clinical experience. And I think it leaves a lasting impression, right? Because it's your sort of final impression of the overall encounter. So generally, people are really positive about the clinical experience and negative about the financial experience.
Right, which is the last experience they usually have. So that's what you talk about, this link between the financial, the clinical, and how the patient views that health organization's brand
as a whole. Yeah, exactly. Because again, we love working with health systems here. I love working with our health system partners, and I think this is a situation that has happened to the health system rather than has been one of their own making. What we find when we talk to our clients or health systems that we're working with, they often actually don't know the scale of the challenge that they have in terms of just the amount of money that is owed to them from patients. That number has crept up on them, right? It's really a surprise to them. And so therefore it's also not surprising that they haven't thought about rounding out the experience from from the financial point of view. So it really, it doesn't surprise me at all that this is an area that they haven't really looked at or looked into properly yet.
Right, but you see it as part of the holistic approach to the patient engagement and experience.
It really is, because what I worry about is that with every paper statement that is sent out from a health system today, and let's face it, there are millions of them being sent out every day, right? I'd love to know the number, right? Millions of them being sent out every day. I feel like each one of those is sort of a little dent in the consumer's brand perception of that health system. And if I think about the health systems that we work with, and we tend to work with larger systems like Intermountain Healthcare and Salt Lake City, for example, these are very important institutions in their communities. I mean, the reputation that those kinds of organizations have built up over decades, over generations, has been sort of very carefully nurtured and well established, right? And I think that big health systems that are these sort of pillars of their communities across the country maybe don't even realize the damage that they're doing to their brands by this, like we've said, this sort of bad bookend to the overall experience.
Yeah, you're right. The patient gets sort of the bad news at the start of the clinical side of it, because that's what they're being treated for, right? And that can be obviously a zillion different things, and then the end capper, of course, is then the patient financial responsibility and explanation of benefits and whatnot, right?
And wading through it all, right?
Yeah.
And exactly. And these become very, very personal, very emotional stories that attract a huge amount of negative publicity and a lot of attention.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to What's My Tagline, and my guest today is Will Reilly of VisitPay, and we're talking about how to apply healthcare marketing to the billing experience. So let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about, I'm the healthcare marketing person, or I'm in charge of the team at a health system or a healthcare organization. What skill set or tools do I need, or does my team need to help improve that patient financial experience through marketing?
Yeah, I mean, two spring to mind. I mean, one is an analytical mindset, which is something that's important to any contemporary marketer, right? I mean, you talk to any marketer today and they'll describe how the profession has changed significantly with the ready availability of data and analysis. And of course, any marketer begins by wondering and thinking who their target audience is, right? Who's my quote buyer, right? Who am I trying to reach? And so the combination of that question with an analytical mindset leads a marketer quickly to think about different types of patient. If you think about how modern consumer marketing or business-to-business marketing works today, the whole experience is grounded in the creation of like-minded groups of individuals, segments, whatever you want to call them, right? But some grouping of individuals that have some sort of basis in data and fact, right, around behaviors or need states or situations. Because what the marketer wants to start to do is to think about how to treat people as individuals and meet them where they are, but doing that at scale. So you immediately start thinking about data and analytics, and how can you use data and analytics to begin to understand this mass of patients in a more meaningful way. That's the first thing. I think the second thing that the marketer needs to do is build the vocabulary. And I found this very interesting coming into healthcare as a newbie to the industry over the last 9 months or so. The vocabulary around revenue cycle is, I suppose like anything really, it's its own language, right? And it's quite technical, and it's not very friendly to the individual. So actually I think it's very important for the marketer to engage quite deeply with the patient financial experience or the revenue cycle team to actually really understand how it works. Because one thing I've observed is that marketers tend to get involved, in my experience, on the financial side of the health system, sort of as custodians of the brand, custodians of the brand identity. And I don't think that goes far enough, because I think if you want to really affect the experience, you have to understand it. So really learning the vocabulary, I think, is another super important competence that healthcare marketers need to build.
Yeah, they're both really interesting points. And to your first point about using analytics, obviously that kind of ties back to your tagline, one size doesn't fit all. The idea is not to sort of create, if I'm hearing you correctly, some, marketing message that you think will resonate with every thousands of patients across your spectrum, right? You have to, yeah.
And it's not just a marketing message; it's the whole experience, right? That should vary according to what patients actually want, because it's really easy to make it easy to pay a bill, right? It's really easy to build a website where you can have someone pay a bill online or pay a bill on a mobile device, right? That's not the answer. It's not about making it's not about just making a bad process easy to understand. I mean, it's part of the battle, but it's not the whole battle. And if you look at the way that, say, people in the consumer finance industry think, it's really all about tailoring the whole experience to the needs of an individual or a group of people, which means, for example, the offers that they see change, right? So in other words, you and I, Carol, we may both be faced with paying a bill for $1,000, let's say, right? We both got a bill for $1,000. But your situation may be completely different from mine, right? And if you're the health system, you want to make the right decision for that individual, and you want to make the right decision for you as a health system who's trying to, after all, collect revenue that's owed to them. And so when we think about tailoring the experience, it's not just about tailoring the messaging, but it's actually about tailoring the whole thing, tailoring the offer set. So for example, Carol, we may say to you, the health system may say to you, yeah, we know you have this $1,000 bill to contend with, Carol, but we think that you should be able to pay that back in 3 or 4 months, right? And here's how we can make that really easy for you. Whereas for me, the health system may say, well, we get you're in a different situation, and we want to give you, a couple of years to deal with that obligation so that you can manage it in a way that will work for you. That's the sort of experience that we're looking for. But of course, you need to be able to do that, not just in a call center context, which is very high touch and very expensive to administer. You need to be doing that at massive scale digitally, right? Dealing with thousands and thousands of people all at once. And of course, in a way that is compliant, in a way that is fair, in a way that doesn't disrupt your mission to provide service to anybody that comes through the door.
Right. And certainly, as you mentioned earlier, we live in a world of analytics, obviously. And so as the patient's information is being collected from start to finish, you're using those analytics to help craft those two different messages as you use, for example.
Exactly, to really understand what people want. And it is interesting because to some extent I think this goes against the grain of the way that healthcare finance people can think, right? Because there's almost a sort of a sense of not wanting to offer a differentiated service. But in fact, health systems do offer a differentiated financial experience all the time, because what happens is everyone gets a paper statement, right? We all agree that, and we all agree that it's not a great experience. What happens then is that people start calling the call center. People start calling and saying, I don't understand it, right? What can I do? How can you help me with this? And decisions are getting made, I wouldn't say on an ad hoc basis, but certainly not on an efficient, and I would argue probably not a consistent basis, right, from individual to individual, right, who calls into the call center and negotiates terms essentially on that. So whether the health system likes it or not, they are lending and they are making consumer credit decisions all the time. The fact is that they're not generally doing it in a very optimized or efficient way.
Yeah, because it's that retail experience of healthcare, right? I guess. Yeah. And does that get back to like even the use of language that you use? I mean, obviously, every patient, or the vast majority of patients have a credit card, right, of
Yeah,
some sort,
yeah.
or several credit cards, and they understand the process of how they could pay that credit card off, be it over time or pay it completely in the month that it's owed, and the language is pretty ubiquitous across
Exactly.
that particular experience.
Exactly. Well, and so are things like, I mean, so that credit card analogy is a really good one, right? Because if you think about the experience, again, if you just digitize a statement, this is a good reason why this isn't the answer, because the way statementing works a lot of the time right now is you'll get a statement per encounter, right? You get a statement from your physician, you get a statement from the hospital, like you get your one visit, one encounter could generate a very large number of statements. The equivalent of that would be, using your credit card at a restaurant and getting a statement from the restaurant, then buying an airline, buying an air ticket and getting a statement sent to you from the airline. I mean, it would be a complete nightmare. We just don't accept that, right? The value that a credit card company provides is integrating all of those different individual moments, right, into one uniform and comprehensible thing that we get once a month, right? That we understand that. So it's a really good analogy, because a lot of the experience just lies in actually turning what today is this sort of multi-touch point billing experience into actually something that's unified and just familiar from other settings. Exactly.
And so obviously that change of thinking about billing, if you're a healthcare system, and making it more of that retail experience, obviously the leap of faith I make is that, and the healthcare system is probably quicker and faster in getting paid on their receivables.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the thing. This area is such low-hanging fruit for health systems,
right?
Because if you think so, everyone from a healthcare finance perspective is worried about margin, right? There's this phrase that goes around: there's no mission without margin, right? Fair enough. So every healthcare CFO is concerned about margin now, and they're seeing margin pressure for all sorts of reasons. Well, patient billing, which may now represent 20 to 30% of the overall revenue due to the health system. I mean, you've already provided the service. You have sent out the bills, right? So you will collect significantly more if you can offer an experience that people respond to. And that is real money. I mean, that goes straight to the bottom line of the health system. So from a financial perspective, you just can't overlook the opportunity that lies there if the finance team wants to grasp it. But the great thing about it is that it builds the brand as well, because we've got plenty of hard evidence to show the massive lift in satisfaction that occurs with the billing process when you can tailor it, make it more understandable, more transparent, put the consumer in control of how they pay, all these things that you can now do through technology. Patients absolutely love it, and you see very high net promoter scores. You see very significant increase in satisfaction with the billing experience, which in turn relates to obviously then a very high, a higher appreciation of the brand of the health system overall. So it is genuinely a complete win-win for both health system and the patient to be tackling the space.
Yeah, and as we've got a few minutes left here, but I think this is a great way to sort of wind down our conversation. I love this idea that you talk about how hospitals and health systems don't think of themselves as banks and credit card companies, but in reality, they should be, right? And that emotional payoff in terms of insight into the patient state of mind and emotional well-being, this is what is really at the heart of all of this, correct? Because you're right, the patient's going to eventually pay anyway, and you don't want to take that patient all the way to collections, or perhaps you don't even want to be the health system that just assumes that 10% of this is going to be written. I don't know what the write-ups are there. I'm sure in RCM you could tell me that the average hospital or health system expects to write off a certain percent of receivables every year, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, well, and a certain proportion will be, written off for financial assistance and for charity, which continues. The real opportunity for the health system is digging into the stuff that isn't financial assistance, where people generally want to pay and have some ability to do so. But you're dead right that I think that the sort of final thing that the marketer can do, and we've talked about treating people as individuals, right, at scale, right, and using data and analytics to do that. We've talked about vocabulary and just thinking about how to present this in a way that is understandable and consistent with other experiences that we might have, like credit cards. I think the third piece of the puzzle that the marketer can really help with is stitching all of this together into an end-to-end experience. And again, marketers often think about a journey, right? We often think about a consumer journey, right? And what's interesting about healthcare is you've got this quite complicated mix of sort of digital and physical touch points in that journey. And what we're working with health systems to do now is to think about how to bring the financial experience to life across all of those touch points. And actually that's very interesting. And I would encourage anyone listening who works for a health system, next time you go into the hospital or a clinic, just look around and see what information is out there and available to patients around financial options. And what we tend to find is that there's sort of really outdated or complex brochures about claiming for charity care or financial assistance, which are, aren't really targeted at the mainstream of patients who are, just working families who are trying to pay a bill,
Right.
And so actually thinking about this as a journey from beginning to end will allow, is again, a natural thing that a marketer can bring, but it helps the health system get ahead of this problem so that you're not just dealing with a nasty shock at the end, either in paper or digital form. You're actually helping people through that process from the outset and from the beginning, and providing them with options and helpful information in a way that's meaningful to them. So that journey piece can't be overestimated as another important area where the marketer, I think, can have real impact on this experience.
Yeah, and take the whole uncertainty question out of it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, someone's going to have a baby, for example, you know pretty much, right, what's going to happen. And so there are some really obvious areas, whether you define them by clinical segments or you define them in other ways, but there really is some low-hanging fruit out there to make the whole experience so much better quite quickly and easily.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you, Carol. It's been great talking to you. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, me too. You can learn more about Will Reilly and his company, VisitPay, at www.visitpay.com. And be sure to follow Will on Twitter at VisitPayWill and the company at VisitPay. You can share your thoughts or comments on Twitter at #What'sMyTagline or visit the program page on healthcarenowradio.com. Have a topic related to our show you want to hear about? Or are you an expert who would like to be on the show? Reach out to me on Twitter at Carol Flagg or email me at carol@healthcarenowradio.com. Until next time, I'm Carol Flagg, and I want to know, what's your tagline?